If you didn't hear, former MSNBC host Ed Schultz passed away the other day. It's always sad when someone dies, and I'd wanted to make a video on something he said for seemingly the longest of times now, but admittedly I'd forgot about it until I heard about his death. Ed had some interesting information to share regarding Bernie Sanders, MSNBC, and the 2016 Democratic primaries.
When Bernie Sanders was announcing that he was going to be a candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party in Burlington, Vermont, I was the only cable host between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN that was there live to cover it. Now, there were live cameras there, but we had coordinated with the Sanders campaign that at 5 o'clock he was going to make his announcement, and we were going to cover this on the Ed Show. I go to Bernie Sanders' house that afternoon and interview in the backyard, about a 15-minute interview. The grandkids are running around. It's a big day for the Sanders family. He's going to announce that he's running for president. We're going to carry it live later on in the day, and we're going to run this one-on-one tape with Bernie. 3,000 people are there on Lake Champlain. It's 5 minutes to air, and I get a phone call from Phil Griffin. "You're not covering this." I said, "Phil, Bernie Sanders is announcing he's running for president. He's going to be a president." "I don't care. You're not covering this." And it got rather contentious.
Why though?
I don't, well, now you're asking me for opinion. I'm giving you fact right now about what happened. Mm-hmm. And other people who were there with me will attest to the fact and back me up that this is what happened. We were told that we had to cover something down in Texas that was totally meaningless, and another press conference in Baltimore, which was already had been in the news for a few days. We're covering Bernie Sanders live. We're coordinated with his campaign. And I'm told 5 minutes before, "You're not covering Bernie Sanders." Now, let me give you the opinion. I think the Clintons were connected to Andy Lack, connected at the hip. I think that they didn't want anybody in their prime time or anywhere in their lineup supporting Bernie Sanders. I think that they were in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and I think it was managed, and 45 days later I was out at MSNBC. When you see how the campaign unfolded, Donna Brazile feeding Hillary Clinton questions at the campaign, the DNC undercutting Bernie Sanders, the superdelegates that were organized by Hillary Clinton. I mean, in my state of Minnesota, where I'm a resident and pay taxes, Al Franken and Amy Klobuchar were superdelegates, and despite the fact that Bernie Sanders won Minnesota, they supported Clinton. It was the fix was in. The fix was in with the mainstream media. The fix was in with managing the news and shutting down Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't until he started matching the Clintons and raising money that he became, well, we got to cover this guy. But from the start, the Clintons didn't want any competition. They didn't want Bernie Sanders around. They didn't want the Keystone XL pipeline. They didn't want to push her on that issue. They didn't want to push her on free education for all, and they certainly didn't want to push her on the TPP and also universal health care. Those were four main issues that Bernie Sanders, had he not been to the campaign, Hillary Clinton would have never had to address. And so I think the fix was in early on to Deep Six Bernie. To this day, it kind of pisses me off.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Now look, Ed was fired from MSNBC, and these are just his words, so we can't just take this information as fact 100%. Although he did say that people could check with others there and that they would back him up on the information he was conveying. And if this were a lie, it'd be so easy to disprove, so for the record, I do believe him. Alright, so let's get to breaking this down. First, Ed says that he was the only cable host present for Bernie Sanders' announcement of his campaign between the three major news networks. You would think that a politician announcing his or her candidacy would be something a major news network would want to cover, but in the case of Bernie Sanders, apparently not. In fact, Ed says the president of MSNBC called him 5 minutes before they were to go on air and told him not to cover Bernie announcing his run for presidency. Now that's quite some revelation. The president of MSNBC told Ed, one of his hosts, that he cannot cover a candidate announcing his run for presidency. And Ed takes it a step further and says that he thinks MSNBC was in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and that he thinks that they did not want any of their hosts supporting Bernie Sanders. And just 45 days later, Ed was fired from MSNBC. Then Ed starts listing off various ways the Democratic primary was rigged against Bernie Sanders, like how Donna Brazile was feeding debate questions to Hillary, and how superdelegates were undercutting democracy, going against the will of the voters and supporting Clinton, even when the voters they were supposed to represent chose Bernie. Finally, Ed literally says the fix was in terms of the mainstream media, and that Hillary did not want Bernie around. She didn't want any competition. Ed thinks the fix was in early on to knock out Bernie from the race. Now, unfortunately, the overall gist of this information is not surprising. It was pretty obvious that the election was rigged against Bernie, and it was pretty obvious that MSNBC was in the tank for Hillary. I mean, I know as a Bernie Sanders supporter myself, I stopped watching MSNBC because they were so biased, so pro-Hillary, and so anti-Bernie that it was driving me nuts. There was seemingly no one ever on in terms of hosts and guests on the show to provide the point of view of progressives, and it was just extremely frustrating. The information that Ed relayed that I did find to be quite the revelation, however, as aforementioned, is that he said that the president of MSNBC literally called him to tell him not to cover Bernie. Moreover, Ed also implied that he was fired from MSNBC just 45 days later because MSNBC didn't want any of their hosts being pro-Bernie, which is pretty crazy. Ed Schultz's revelations really give one the sense of how much MSNBC was in the tank for Hillary Clinton. Hey guys, if you want to help out this show, you can follow our various social media links. Also, we have a Facebook group that you can join as well. And if you want to follow me on social media, you could do that as well. Alright guys,